Thank you for your very thoughtful questions, Ranking Member. I now call on Mr. Lamb for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and thank you to our witnesses for your participation. First, a question about data, and it kind of follows from something the Ranking Member was asking. You know, there does tend to be this assumption that when veterans do something wrong, especially something radically wrong, like attack the Capitol on January 6th, and we all saw the Marine Corps logo and other logos all over that attack, that decision is somehow rooted in a problem that veterans are having with their transition to civilian life. Does the data actually show us that about the January 6th defendants or people who are similarly committed to groups like the Oath Keepers that call for the overthrow of the United States, or is that still at the hypothesis stage? I know other public reporting has pointed out how many of the January 6th insurrectionists were business owners and people for whom economic opportunity was really not the issue. So I was just curious if we have any answers to that question yet.
I can address part of that question, Mr. Lamb. What we have data that shows there's disproportionate engagement, and we know that there are some conditions that make engagement in extremism a little bit more likely or that there's disproportionate engagement among those who have experienced involuntary exit from the military, for example. That research is there. But we do not have sufficient research, I would say, to call for additional data transparency, for data collection, and for research really into the actual reasons why veterans are engaging in those movements. What we know is that they're attracted in part for some of these narratives and that the narratives seek to manipulate them. But I think we have we have had a lack of attention in the research space to that. So that would be something to look into as well.
Absolutely.
Representative Lamb, if I could just add to that, the just broadening this from January 6th for a moment, I think what the data does suggest is for veterans that we are seeing a growing percentage of plots and attacks over the last couple of years involving veterans. What the data does show is that the capabilities that veterans have does present some concern just because of their tactical abilities, their communication capabilities, small unit tactics, that those kind of capabilities do present a risk. But there are a lot of questions that we don't necessarily know yet that I would just say as we're looking for solutions to this problem, I think we need to answer a couple of questions before we really can understand what kind of solutions we need to help veterans. And this is, I think, where we have to go.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of why I was asking. I don't know yet if the answer is sort of programmatic in the way that we would think about other veterans issues. It could also be that in the last couple of years, something else happened that never happened in American history, which is that, troops for the first time had a commander-in-chief who condoned and even called for and incited a violent insurrection on his own country. And so that's bound to have some effect on the people who, are under his command, which they were on the day of January 6th. So I do think it could be different in terms of what the true cause is. Regardless, someone, I think it was Jeremy, used the phrase that we need to police our own. And I agree with that. And I'm just curious how anyone on the panel, maybe starting with Jeremy, because I haven't heard from you yet, would view a sort of campaign or class that would feature some of the people who pled guilty from January 6th that are veterans, talking about how misguided they were and their mistakes. Some of them are bound to come to that realization, probably not all, but in any case of this nature, there will be people who regret what they did and regret their betrayal of the oath that they thought they were protecting. It strikes me that sort of peer-to-peer voice is probably more important than, the voice of experts. But Jeremy, or maybe Lieutenant Colonel Plensler, if you could address that, please.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, I think any campaign that would probably be more effective if it took place as more of a peer-to-peer thing than a PSA type of event, because I think that's where the message is going to be much better received than from more of a top-down part. And I'll stop because I think Joe's got a comment as well.
Thank you, and thanks for the question. More than about 1/3 of our veterans formerly belong to a veteran service organization. And I think one strategy I would try to employ is to have the FBI or Department of Homeland Security brief the leaders of our veteran service organizations on this threat so that they become more knowledgeable about what's going on. I would ask them in this committee to ask these leaders to raise these issues with their members, throughout their command structure within their organizations in all 50 states. I would also ask them to reinforce the values of the organization and how these veteran organizations were brought up to withstand the threat of things like communism after World War I, right? And then paint the behavior as a deviant behavior. Say, hey, this is absolutely wrong. Like, veterans should have never shown up. They shouldn't be part of these organizations. Paint that as a deviant behavior, and then paint your membership as a solution to that problem. And I think lastly, provide them things to do. What do you do when you recognize a veteran who might be slipping into this kind of ideology? How do you fish them out of that and put them on a better track? So I think, those 5 steps are what I'd take a look at doing.
Thank you all. I'm out of time. Mr.